Maria Elena Vasquez mysteriously disappeared at Mexico City International Airport in 2007, in one of the most intriguing and mysterious cases ever recorded. Security cameras captured her last movements with precision. At 3:47 p.m., she passed through security. At 4:15 a.m., she bought a magazine at a store in the departures area, and at 4:32 a.m., she entered the restroom near Gate B12, from which she never emerged. Maria Elena checked in normally but never boarded the flight to Los Angeles. Her luggage arrived at its destination, but she seemed to have vanished into thin air. Authorities and her family searched for answers for years, without finding any concrete clues as to what really happened that day. Subscribe to the channel, like us, can you, and activate the bell to receive all our notifications. This story is unmissable, full of twists, secrets, and tense moments that will keep you hooked until the very last second. Stay until the end to discover every detail of this mystery. After the unexplained disappearance of Maria Elena Vasquez at Mexico City International Airport in August 2007, the life of her sister, Carmen Vasquez, changed completely. What began as a nightmare of uncertainty turned into a desperate search that would last more than a decade. Carmen refused to accept the idea that her sister had simply vanished without a trace. Determined, she took the lead in the investigation parallel to the authorities, driven by love, guilt, and an unshakable hope that Maria Elena was still alive somewhere. In the first few months, Carmen explored every avenue available. She did what many families of the disappeared do in a country where missing persons cases often fall into oblivion. She printed hundreds of posters with Maria Elena's photo. Her young face, sweet gaze, and serene expression, accompanied by an urgent plea for information. These posters were pasted on lampposts, walls, bus stops, and subway stations throughout Mexico City and the surrounding area. With each new area covered, Carmen felt she was taking another step toward keeping her sister's memory alive and preventing the case from being forgotten. At the same time, she visited public hospitals and clinics, hoping to find someone matching Maria Elena's description. She walked crowded corridors, spoke with doctors, nurses, and even patients, showing them photographs and describing the disappearance in detail. On several occasions, she believed she had found a clue, but it always ended in disappointment. When hospital searches yielded no results, Carmen began visiting morgues and forensic institutes. These visits were emotionally devastating. She had to summon the courage to look into the faces of unidentified bodies, fearing and, at the same time, hoping that one of them was her sister, just to end the torture of doubt. As time passed, Carmen didn't let up on her efforts. She hired private investigators with the little money she had, and when her resources ran out, she organized fundraising campaigns with friends, neighbors, and even strangers who were touched by her grief. The family even offered a reward of 500,000 Mexican pesos to anyone who could provide any information leading to Maria Elena's whereabouts. This sum, extremely high for the time, demonstrated the Vasquez family's desperation and determination. Despite this, the leads that emerged were almost always false, created by unscrupulous individuals seeking to exploit Carmen's emotional vulnerability and the family's suffering. The authorities, for their part, seemed incapable of making progress. Official reports were vague. Security camera footage had been reviewed repeatedly, and no new evidence emerged. As the months passed, the case began to fade from police records, but Carmen refused to let the story be forgotten. She gave interviews to newspapers and television programs, appeared on local radio stations, and pressured authorities to reopen the case whenever even the slightest clue emerged. During this period, several theories began to circulate. The first, and most painful for Carmen, was the hypothesis of a voluntary disappearance. Some investigators believed that Maria Elena, faced with possible personal or financial problems, might have decided to abandon everything and start a new life elsewhere. This idea, however, seemed absurd to Carmen. She knew her sister as a responsible, loving woman, committed to the future she had planned, especially to her fiancé, James Morrison, whom she would marry in a few weeks. Maria Elena would never have willingly caused such suffering to her family. Another theory that gained traction was that of a kidnapping for human trafficking purposes. Mexico City International Airport was known as a transit point for criminal networks dedicated to sexual exploitation and human trafficking. This possibility plunged Carmen into an even deeper state of anguish. She imagined her sister being forcibly taken, held captive, perhaps outside the country, with no way to call for help. For years, she collaborated with organizations defending missing women and support networks for trafficking victims, trying to trace connections that might lead to some clue. There was also talk of a possible accident inside the airport, a hypothesis that sounded less likely but still disturbing. Some suggested that Maria Elena might have fallen, fainted, or even collapsed in a restricted area, and that, for some reason, authorities had covered up the incident to avoid scandal. Others believed in a more elaborate cover-up, perhaps involving airport employees or people with access to surveillance areas who could have manipulated the recordings or hidden evidence. None of these theories provided concrete answers, but they all contributed to the maze of uncertainty Carmen lived in. With each new hypothesis, she delved into further investigations, revisiting places, speaking with witnesses, and reviewing the same documents repeatedly. Time, which for many tends to erase memories, only intensified her determination. On Maria Elena's birthdays, Carmen organized small vigils, lighting candles and gathering friends and family to pray. On social media and forums dedicated to missing persons cases, she kept her sister's name alive, always sharing information and updates, hoping that someone, somewhere, would recognize Maria Elena's face or remember something important. Even as everyone around her began to accept the possibility that Maria Elena would never be found, Carmen remained steadfast, guided by an instinct that told her the truth was still hidden, waiting to be discovered. Carmen Vasquez's search was not only a journey for answers, but also a portrait of the power of human hope in the face of despair. She became a symbol of the struggle of families who refused to give up, even when time, the authorities, and logic itself seemed to conspire against them. Amid lies, false clues, and empty promises, Carmen kept alive her love for her sister and the faith that one day the mystery would be solved. Her perseverance transformed Maria Elena's case into more than a tragedy. It became a story about the strength of an unbreakable family bond and the courage to face the unknown in search of the truth. On November 23, 2018, after 11 long years and 4 months without any clue as to the whereabouts of Maria Elena Vasquez, a simple notification sound broke the silence that had marked Carmen Vasquez's life since her sister's disappearance. It was an ordinary evening, and Carmen was preparing Thanksgiving dinner with her husband Roberto and their children. Amid the clatter of utensils and the aroma of dinner, the ringing of her cell phone seemed a trivial event, until her eyes fell on the sender of the message, Maria Elena's phone number, the same one that had been inactive since 2007. For a moment, Carmen felt her body freeze, the air escape her lungs, and her heart raced at an uncontrollable rate. The short, direct text seemed like something out of a nightmare. "Carmen, I'm alive. I can't talk on the phone. Come alone to the cemetery where Dad is. Tomorrow at noon." For a few seconds, she thought she was dreaming. The number on the screen was unmistakable, the same one she had dialed countless times in the first years after her disappearance. The same one the phone company had confirmed had been deactivated for over a decade. Shock gave way to amazement, and the amazement quickly turned into a mixture of hope and fear. If the number truly belonged to Maria Elena, it meant she was alive. But why, after so many years, would it reappear so mysteriously and with such a clandestine tone? Why would it ask for a meeting in a cemetery at midnight and demand that Carmen go alone? Carmen read the message over and over, unable to believe what she was seeing. Her hands were shaking. The phone felt like it weighed a ton. The memories came flooding back with devastating force. The day she took her sister to the airport, their last hug, the promise of a call as soon as she arrived in Los Angeles. 11 years of silence and pain crumbled in the face of one short sentence, as if no time had passed. When Roberto noticed his wife's condition, he ran to her and asked what had happened. When she showed him the message, he reacted with skepticism and immediate concern. "Carmen," he said, trying to keep his voice calm, "it can't be real. After 11 years, someone is playing a game with you. This is cruel." But Carmen couldn't believe it was a hoax. The location mentioned in the message, the cemetery where their father was buried, was an intimate detail that no one outside the family knew. It was a discreet place, far from the center of Texcoco, visited only on special occasions. The mere fact that the sender knew this seemed like irrefutable proof that, somehow, Maria Elena was behind the message. The night passed without sleep. Carmen tried to reason, but her mind seemed to be spinning in circles, unable to decide between prudence and impulse. Roberto insisted that she call the police, or at least Detective Miguel Hernandez, who had investigated the case years before, but she couldn't risk it. What if it really was her sister? What if a mistake, a complaint, put Maria Elena in danger? The message was clear: ven sola. Any interference could destroy their only chance of reunion in over a decade. The next morning, Carmen tried to continue her normal routine, but each second seemed to drag on with growing anguish. She compulsively watched the clock, counting the hours, imagining what awaited her that night. As irrational as it seemed, a part of her believed that when she arrived at the cemetery, she would see Maria Elena alive, older, different, but alive. As the sun began to set, Carmen dressed in dark, understated clothes and pocketed her cell phone. She left the house quietly, careful not to wake her husband, who had fallen asleep after hours of trying to convince her to give up. However, as soon as the car engine started, Roberto woke and ran to the window. He saw the car's taillights moving away into the darkness and felt a shiver run through him. He tried to call her, but Carmen didn't answer. He hesitated between following her or respecting the message's mysterious condition, which demanded absolute secrecy. Ultimately, he decided not to interfere. Tormented by a feeling of helplessness, the road to San Miguel Cemetery in Coatlinchan was nearly deserted. The sound of the engine was the only noise breaking the nighttime silence. Carmen kept her hands firmly on the steering wheel, but her heart seemed to be beating erratically. When she reached the cemetery entrance, she parked the car and remained inside for a few moments, gazing into the darkness beyond the rusted iron gate. The tall, crooked trees cast shadows that seemed to move in the dim moonlight. He gathered his courage and entered. The air was cold and dense, and each step echoed with the sound of dry leaves beneath his feet. He knew the place well. He had grown up visiting his father's grave with Maria Elena every year, but he had never seen it so ominous. He walked to the family grave, located beneath an old cypress tree, and waited. The clock read 11:58 p.m. 2 minutes later, the silence was broken by the distant sound of footsteps slowly approaching. Carmen felt her body paralyze. She tried to speak, but her voice wouldn't come. From within the darkness, a hooded figure emerged, moving slowly and deliberately. Instinct told her to flee, but hope kept her still. When the figure stopped a few meters away, a hoarse, cold voice echoed, "Carmen Vasquez, you're coming only as if you asked." Fear gave way to disbelief. The voice wasn't Maria Elena's, but the stranger extended his hand and revealed a small object gleaming in the pale moonlight. It was a gold chain with a butterfly pendant, the same necklace Maria Elena wore on the day of the trip. Carmen recognized it instantly. She took the object with trembling hands, unable to hold back her tears. The metal was cold, but the memory was warm and vivid. Before she could ask any questions, the figure answered with words that would forever be etched in Carmen's memory. "Your sister cannot come. She is in a place where they cannot find her. But she is alive. I said I love you." What happened next remains shrouded in mystery. Carmen reported trying to follow the hooded figure but lost her in the shadows. She returned home stunned, unsure whether she had experienced a reunion or a trap. The only physical evidence was the gold chain, the tangible symbol that Maria Elena was still alive, or that someone very close to her wanted Carmen to believe so. That night, the line between hope and terror dissolved completely. The 2018 message rekindled a flame that seemed extinguished, but it also opened new, dark questions. Who had sent the text message? How had Maria Elena's inactive number been reactivated after so long? And, above all, what really happened to her inside that airport in 2007? For Carmen, the mystery was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning again. The night of November 24, 2018, was forever etched in Carmen Vasquez's memory. After receiving a mysterious message from her missing sister's phone number, she followed the instructions that seemed to have come from a ghost. The destination was the San Miguel Cemetery in Coatlinchan, a small town in Texcoco. The road there was practically deserted, and the cold, early morning air felt heavier than ever. Fear and hope mingled in her chest, creating an almost unbearable sensation. Carmen knew the request to go alone was strange and dangerous, but she also knew that if there was even a slight chance of finding Maria Elena again, she had to take the risk. The clock struck 11:58 when Carmen parked her car near the cemetery's rusty iron gate. The place was plunged into a sepulchral silence, broken only by the rustling of ancient eucalyptus leaves surrounding the stone wall. The moon, nearly obscured by clouds, cast distorted shadows on the tombstones, giving the place an almost dreamlike appearance. With a small flashlight in hand, Carmen entered the cemetery, trying to control the sound of her own footsteps. She walked slowly through the narrow dirt corridors, guided by the memory of the countless times she had visited her father's grave with her sister. The difference was that this time, fear was her only companion. When she finally reached the tomb of Esteban Vasquez, her deceased father, the clock struck midnight. Carmen looked around tensely, seeing no one. For a moment, she thought it was all a cruel joke, a trap set by someone heartless. But seconds later, the soft sound of footsteps on the dry leaves that covered the ground echoed among the tombs. The sound approached slowly, rhythmically, as if the person wanted to be heard. Carmen felt a shiver run down her spine. She tried to call out for Maria Elena, but her voice caught in her throat. A hooded figure emerged from the darkness. The person was dressed entirely in black, the hood covering their face and their hands protected by dark gloves. They stood a few meters away, motionless in front of her. Carmen wanted to run, but her legs felt rooted to the spot. The silence was so thick she could hear her own heartbeat. Then the figure spoke in a low, hoarse voice. "Carmen Vasquez, you have come alone as if you asked for it." The voice, though human, had something inhuman in its measured, cold tone. Carmen gathered her strength to answer, her voice trembling. "Where is my sister? Where is Maria Elena?" The figure remained silent for a few seconds before stepping forward and extending its hand. Between its gloved fingers, it held something that reflected the faint moonlight. Slowly, it moved close enough for Carmen to see. It was a gold chain with a butterfly-shaped pendant. Carmen felt the breath leave her lungs. That necklace was the same one she and Maria Elena had chosen together years before. An engagement gift to mark the new phase in her sister's life. It was a symbol of affection and complicity. Maria Elena had worn it on the day of her trip, and it had never been seen since her disappearance. Taking the necklace with trembling hands, Carmen recognized the small scratch on one of the butterfly's wings, caused when her sister once dropped it on the floor of the store where they had purchased it. There was no doubt. It was the same one. "How did you get this?" she asked, her voice wavering between tears and disbelief. The figure didn't respond immediately. It was silent for a few moments before saying, "Your sister asked me to give you this. I said you'd understand." Carmen, confused and frightened, pressed again. "Where is she? Why no wine?" The answer was even more disconcerting. "Maria Elena can't come. She's in a place where they can't find her. But she's alive. She said she loves you and to stop looking for her. It's safer that way." The words echoed like a blow. Carmen felt her legs weaken and had to lean on a nearby gravestone to prevent them from falling. Her voice was firm, almost compassionate, but carried a gravity that suggested real danger. Trying to regain control, Carmen insisted, "If you've really been with my sister, tell me something only she would know." There was a brief silence before the figure responded. "She says to remember the injured cat they found behind Don Fernando's shop. They were 12 and 14. You said they couldn't afford the vet. She sold her bracelet to do so. The cat died that night, and you promised her that one day you would buy her one just like it." Tears began to flow uncontrollably. The memory was true. A secret kept only between the two sisters since childhood. No relative, friend, or acquaintance had ever heard this story. It could only mean one thing. The person before her had somehow truly been with Maria Elena. But the revelation brought more fear than relief. "Like, what does it mean that it's more certain than everyone thinks she's dead?" Carmen asked. The figure took a step back, slowly moving away. "Your sister has become involved with powerful and dangerous people. If the higher authorities believe she's alive, both she and you would be in danger. It's better that she remains a mystery." Carmen tried to run after the figure, but within seconds, it disappeared into the shadows. She was left alone in the cemetery, clutching the necklace to her chest, unsure whether to feel relief knowing her sister was alive or despair knowing she might never see her again. Silence fell again, and the distant sound of dogs barking was the only sign of life. Back in the car, Carmen stood there for minutes, unable to start the engine. She relived every word, every gesture, every sound from that night. Fear mingled with hope, and the necklace, now cold in her hands, was the only proof that the encounter had actually happened. When she finally returned home, it was almost 3 in the morning. Roberto was waiting for her, pale and distressed. Upon seeing her, he tried to explain, but Carmen was in shock. Unable to form coherent sentences, she simply opened her hand and showed the necklace, the silent symbol that something extraordinary, and perhaps dangerous, had just happened. That morning, Carmen realized that the mystery surrounding Maria Elena's disappearance was far from solved. The encounter at the cemetery didn't bring peace. but rather new questions, much darker than the previous ones. If her sister was truly alive, why couldn't she return? What kind of powerful and dangerous people were behind all this? And above all, who was the hooded figure who had served as a messenger between two worlds, that of the living and that of the shadows? In the days following the encounter at the cemetery, Carmen Vasquez felt torn between hope and fear. The butterfly necklace, returned by a hooded figure, was the only physical proof that her sister, Maria Elena Vasquez, might still be alive. But the mystery surrounding that night was so dense that she knew she couldn't move on without answers. Each time she held the necklace in her hands, the feeling of unease grew. It was then that she made a decision that would change the course of her life: to reopen the disappearance investigation. To do so, Carmen turned to the only man she still trusted, Private Detective Miguel Hernandez, who had worked on the case in the early years after the disappearance, between 2007 and 2010. Miguel was known for his patience and thoroughness, a meticulous investigator who wasn't satisfied with easy explanations. When he received Carmen's call, his voice carried surprise, but also empathy. They hadn't been in touch for years, and Maria Elena's case was one the detective had never forgotten. The reunion took place in his small office in Colonia Roma Norte, a space cluttered with old folders, newspaper clippings, and photos from past investigations. Carmen arrived carrying a small wooden box, where she carefully kept the necklace she'd given at the cemetery. She placed it on the table and explained in detail everything that had happened the night of their encounter, and the strange message she'd received days earlier. Miguel listened attentively, without interrupting, analyzing every word. When Carmen finished her story, he picked up the necklace and examined it under the lamplight. Using a magnifying glass, he closely examined the edges of the pendant and frowned when he noticed small, opaque spots on the butterfly's wings. "And this isn't normal wear and tear," he murmured. "These marks look like they're the result of exposure to some kind of acid or corrosive substance." Carmen watched him closely, trying to decipher what this meant. Miguel explained that, in his experience, this type of damage wasn't caused by simple use or aging of the metal. The characteristics indicated that the necklace had been in an industrial environment, perhaps in contact with chemicals used in metal cleaning, casting, or even jewelry counterfeiting. The discovery triggered a warning in the detective's mind. He got up and began rummaging through old files until he found a folder marked Vasquez Case, 2007. Inside were copies of reports, notes, and photographs he had taken during the original investigation. Carmen, there's something I never fully told you because, at the time, I didn't have enough evidence," he said, leafing through the documents. "During my investigation, I discovered that Mexico City International Airport was used by a highly organized criminal network. They not only trafficked drugs and people, but also laundered money through counterfeit jewelry stores." Carmen fell silent, trying to absorb what she was hearing. Miguel continued, "These jewelry stores were fronts. They bought stolen gold and silver, removed the identifying marks with acidic products, and then resold the cleaned pieces on the legal market. It was a sophisticated scheme, with connections within the airport itself, including among security and maintenance staff." The detective paused and added, "If Maria Elena's necklace shows signs of acid exposure, it may have undergone this process, and that suggests a direct link to this network." The revelation sent a chill down Carmen's spine. Until that moment, she had assumed her sister might have been the victim of a random kidnapping, perhaps mistakenly involved in something bigger. But now, the pieces began to fall into place in a grim way. Miguel opened another folder, containing copies of bank records obtained years earlier, documents he had never shown to the family. "I also discovered that Maria Elena had incurred several debts in the months before her disappearance, approximately 200,000 Mexican pesos, distributed among different financial institutions and, primarily, private credit companies." Carmen reacted immediately, surprised and in disbelief. "That can't be. Maria Elena was very responsible with her money. She was about to get married, had plans, and a steady job. If she'd been in trouble, she would have told me." Miguel shook his head slowly. "I understand how you feel, but sometimes people hide their difficulties until the last moment. According to these records, your sister took out loans from companies that no longer appear in the system. They disappeared shortly after she disappeared. I investigated some of them and discovered that many had links to front businesses used by the same criminal network that operated at the airport." Carmen was stunned. The idea that Maria Elena could have been involved with criminals seemed impossible, but at the same time, It explained details that previously hadn't made sense: the sudden disappearance, the prolonged silence, the reappearance of the phone number 11 years later. "So you think my sister was connected to this network?" she asked hesitantly. Miguel took a deep breath before answering. "It's a possibility. Yes. Maybe she was tricked. It could have started as something simple. A favor, a temporary job, a delivery. And before she knew it, she was trapped in a scheme she couldn't escape." He then showed a photograph taken during his 2008 investigation. In it, a man in a maintenance uniform was seen near the airport restrooms, talking on the phone. "This is Ruben Montes," Miguel explained. "He was the leader of the operation. He controlled trafficking and money laundering within the airport. We believe he had contacts in the police and the aviation sector." Carmen fixed her eyes on the photo, observing the man's face with a scar on his left cheek. "But if he was involved, why didn't they arrest him?" Miguel replied, "Because Montes was careful. He constantly changed his identity and had people watching his back. It wasn't until 2015 that he was killed during a confrontation with the federal police in Tijuana. It was a major operation that dismantled part of the network, but many of his associates escaped." Ruben Montes's death explained why the case had gone cold and why so many questions remained unanswered. Carmen realized that, even after so many years, the connections to this network could still be active, and if Maria Elena had indeed been in contact with these people, her life could still be at risk today. Miguel, aware of the gravity of the situation, suggested a new line of investigation, tracking the origin of the phone number used in the message and analyzing whether the line had been recently reactivated. "But if we can find out who had access to that number, we can identify who sent the message and perhaps get to her," he said. Carmen left the office with a heavy heart, but also with a rekindled flame of hope. For the first time in years, there was a concrete path forward. Miguel's revelations not only gave new meaning to the acid-corroded necklace, but also indicated that Maria Elena's disappearance was deeply connected to a complex and powerful web of crimes. That night, when she arrived home, she held the necklace again and understood that it was not just a reminder of her sister, but also a clue, silent proof that the truth, however dark, could still be found. Among the piles of memories and forgotten cardboard boxes in the attic of her mother's old house, Carmen Vasquez found what would become the most important key to understanding the mystery that had consumed her life for over a decade: the personal diary of her missing sister, Maria Elena Vasquez. It was a simple notebook with a blue cover, already yellowed with age, with Maria Elena's name handwritten on the first page. Carmen hesitated before opening it, fearing what she might find. For 11 years, she had imagined every possible scenario about her sister's disappearance. But now she had before her the direct voice of someone who lived through the days leading up to that fateful August 15, 2007. The first few pages seemed harmless. Maria Elena described her routine as an administrative assistant at an import company, her hopes for her marriage to James Morrison, and small details of everyday life. There were notes about dress fittings, guest lists, and fond thoughts about the future. But as Carmen turned the pages, something began to change in the tone of her writing. The sentences became shorter, more tense. The lightness of the first entries was replaced by a growing sense of anxiety. Beginning in May 2007, the entries began to reveal a side of Maria Elena that Carmen had never known. On a page dated May 15th, Carmen read with a heavy heart, "Today I met someone at work. His name is Ricardo. He told me he can help me earn some extra money. I need to settle some debts before the wedding, and this seems like a simple opportunity. I just need to carry some documents during my travels. I don't know exactly what it is, but he seems trustworthy." This sentence sounded banal, but Carmen knew it would be the beginning of something much bigger. In the following pages, Ricardo appeared frequently, always offering quick, well-paying jobs. Maria Elena described her initial services with a certain calm. She said all she had to do was take sealed envelopes or folders to certain people on business trips. "It's nothing illegal," she wrote in June. "They're just import documents." Ricardo said the company needs someone trustworthy to avoid bureaucracy. Apparently, she believed this, but little by little, confidence gave way to doubt. In a note from July the 2nd, her tone had changed. "Ricardo is nervous. He said some documents can't be inspected by customs. I asked why, and he just said it's better if I don't know. I'm starting to get scared." Carmen read and reread these words, her stomach churning. Her sister, always responsible and prudent, was clearly getting involved in something dangerous without realizing its gravity. The following notes made it clear that Maria Elena was trapped in a situation beyond her control. "He promised me it will be the last job," she wrote on July 20th. "After that, I will be free and can start my life with James without worries." Ricardo's promises seem to have convinced Maria Elena to go ahead. Despite the suspicions, financial desperation and the desire to settle her debts before marriage likely pushed her deeper into this labyrinth of secrets. But it was the last entry, dated August 14, 2007, just one day before her disappearance, that cut Carmen like a blade. "Tomorrow will be my last job for Ricardo. He said it will be simple, a quick drop-off at the airport before the flight, but something isn't right. He's different, restless, and he's asked me things about my family that I've never mentioned before. I don't know if I should trust him. I feel like something bad is going to happen. I hope I'm wrong." These words were the last thing Maria Elena wrote before disappearing without a trace. Carmen closed the diary with trembling hands and tears streaming down her face. The doubts that had plagued her for years finally took shape. Maria Elena hadn't been just a random victim. She was, whether consciously or not, involved in a criminal network that used ordinary people to carry out illicit tasks, transporting forged documents, dirty money, or sensitive information. The acid-corroded necklace and Detective Miguel Hernandez's revelations now made sense. Everything indicated that Ricardo was the link connecting her to the underworld of money laundering and international trafficking operating within the airport. Determined to understand it completely, Carmen took the diary to Miguel. The detective read the notes carefully and confirmed her suspicions. "This type of recruitment is common," he explained. "They look for people in debt, in vulnerable emotional situations, and offer quick solutions. First, simple tasks. Then they demand more. By the time they realize what they're really doing, it's too late." Miguel also highlighted the coincidence between Ricardo's name and one of the intermediaries mentioned in old reports about the network led by Ruben Montes. Although there was no concrete evidence, the pattern was identical. People with high debts recruited to transport illegal materials between countries. For Carmen, each new revelation was a mixture of pain and relief. On the one hand, she felt betrayed by her idealized sister's image. But on the other, she understood that Maria Elena had acted out of desperation and fear. The notes clearly showed that she wanted out of that situation, that she planned to end it all and start over. The problem was that, for criminal organizations of this size, no one simply gets out. The diary's clues also reinforced the hypothesis that Maria Elena's disappearance had been carefully planned. She might have been forced to disappear to avoid betraying the network. Or perhaps she had chosen to flee before something worse happened. The tone of the final lines, between distrust and hope, revealed a woman aware of the danger, but still believing she could escape. For nights on end, Carmen reread the diary, searching for details that might point to new clues. Ricardo's name had become an obsession. She imagined his face, his voice, trying to understand how an unknown man had dragged her sister to such a dark fate. And while each page revealed a fragment of the truth, the diary also made it clear that there were still missing pieces: names, dates, places. What exactly was Maria Elena about to deliver that day? And why had the fear, so evident in her final words, been so brutally confirmed? As she closed the notebook for the last time, Carmen felt that the object was more than just a memento. It was a testament to a life interrupted by greater forces, to a woman caught between her love for her family and the trap of organized crime. The diary not only explained the past but also showed the price of silence and the choices that seemed small but changed everything. For Carmen, every word written by her sister was a painful reminder that the truth, however devastating, was still better than living in the darkness of doubt. And with the diary in her hands, she knew she would not rest until she discovered who Ricardo really was, and what happened to Maria Elena on that last day of 2007. The revelation that followed would definitively transform the Maria Elena Vasquez case from a tragic mystery into a story of international significance. After reuniting with Detective Miguel Hernandez and discovering her sister's diary, Carmen believed she had reached the bottom of the mystery. However, what seemed like the end of a cycle turned out to be merely the beginning of a new phase of the investigation, the most complex, dangerous, and enlightening of all. The turning point began when Miguel decided to track the SMS received in 2018, the one that he had, after 11 years of absolute silence, had rekindled the family's hope. Using contacts at telecommunications companies and advanced technological resources, The detective gained access to the metadata of Maria Elena's number. The discovery was shocking. The sending signal had been redirected by multiple transmission towers spread across different Mexican states, creating a virtually impossible-to-follow trail. It was a sophisticated method of digital masking, something that could not be accomplished without professional equipment and technical expertise. Someone wanted to ensure that the origin of this SMS would never be discovered. Miguel explained, "This isn't the work of an ordinary person trying to send an old message. We're dealing with someone who understands concealment, perhaps even with the support of an organized group." The revelation completely changed Carmen's perception. Until then, she believed her sister's reappearance might have been an impulsive act of longing or regret. Now, the situation took on much darker tones. If Maria Elena was alive, she wasn't acting on her own. The use of high-level technology indicated that powerful people were around her, or controlling her movements. This realization rekindled the fear she'd felt at the cemetery, but it also ignited a flame of determination. If her sister was truly alive, no matter how far she'd wandered, she would find her. It was then that Miguel proposed expanding the investigation beyond Mexico's borders. Among the information obtained through former police contacts was an important clue, a possible link between the criminal network dismantled at the airport and similar operations in Los Angeles. Maria Elena's name had surfaced, indirectly, in a report on document forgery and money laundering investigated by U.S. authorities. The hypothesis was bold but coherent. Maria Elena could have crossed the border, assumed a new identity, and begun living illegally in the United States. Carmen didn't hesitate. Even aware of the risks, she embarked with Miguel for Los Angeles, hoping to find definitive answers. The journey was silent and tense. During the flight, Carmen reflected on how much time had transformed her life. Looking out the plane window, she remembered the last moment she'd seen her sister, also at an airport, about to board a flight to the same destination, never imagining that this would be the beginning of an 11-year absence. Now, she repeated the journey, no longer as a farewell, but as a desperate search for reunion. In Los Angeles, Miguel contacted a colleague, investigator David Chen, a specialist in transnational criminal networks and known for his meticulousness. David, of Chinese descent and with extensive experience in infiltration and urban surveillance, immediately agreed to help with the case. Upon hearing Carmen's account, he was particularly interested in the combination of elements: disappearance at an airport, masked messages, and connections to fake jewelry stores, which seemed to fit patterns observed in other investigations. To complete the group, Miguel reached out to Maria Elena's ex-fiancé, James Morrison, who still lived in Santa Monica. James was stunned to learn there were new clues about the woman he'd believed dead for over a decade. Although he'd rebuilt his life, remarried, and started a family, he didn't hesitate to help. "If Maria Elena is really alive, I want to make sure she's okay," he said, visibly shaken. With David's support, the group began reviewing security camera records, public databases, and surveillance information from areas suspected of harboring illicit activity. The investigator used a facial recognition system to compare old images with anonymous profiles recorded on city cameras. For days, the results were disappointing, but after nearly 2 weeks of relentless searching, David found something extraordinary. A series of photographs captured by security cameras in an abandoned warehouse in the industrial district of Los Angeles, known as a meeting place for groups involved in document forgery and money laundering. In one of the images, a woman was leaving the building wearing sunglasses and simple clothing, her face partially obscured. Even with the low resolution, Carmen felt a visceral impact. There was something about her posture, her walk, the way she held her purse close to her body, unmistakable traits of Maria Elena. "Enlarge the image," she asked, her voice trembling. David complied, and after a few adjustments in the software, a detail became visible. The woman was wearing a silver bracelet with small flower-shaped details. Carmen brought her hands to her mouth, overcome with emotion. "It's our grandmother's bracelet. Maria Elena never took it off." The visual confirmation left everyone silent. James, who had been watching the scene, closed his eyes and murmured, "It's her." Miguel, accustomed to dealing with missing persons cases, immediately recognized the significance of this discovery. It wasn't a vague resemblance or a coincidence. It was the first concrete, irrefutable proof that Maria Elena was alive. The team then began discreet surveillance in the area where the woman had been seen. David installed hidden cameras at strategic points, and over the following nights, They observed suspicious movements of vehicles and people entering and leaving the warehouse. Everything indicated that the location was home to a clandestine operation. One night, a female figure appeared again. This time, the captured images were clearer. The woman's face was partially aged. Her hair dyed a darker shade, and her expression was weary, but it was undeniably Maria Elena. Carmen wept when she saw the new photos. Years of searching, despair, and solitary vigils faced with an unexplained absence. Now, the truth was before her. Her sister wasn't dead. She was alive, living in the shadow of a past that had forced her to disappear. The confirmation brought relief, but also fear. If Maria Elena still lived in the shadows, it meant she was still under threat from something or someone. Miguel was the first to break the silence. "She's alive, Carmen, but she's not free." The words echoed in the woman's mind like a sentence. The case that had begun with a simple disappearance now revealed a web of corruption, crime, and survival. Maria Elena had escaped death, but her life had been replaced by a clandestine existence, constantly on the run. For Carmen, it was no longer enough to know her sister was alive. Now, her mission was to bring her back into the light. The reunion between Carmen and Maria Elena Vasquez was the culmination of a search that lasted 11 years and 4 months. After so many false hopes, cold leads, and sleepless nights, Carmen finally had the chance to look into the eyes of the sister she believed lost forever. The meeting took place in front of the Los Angeles Public Library, a location chosen for both practical and symbolic reasons. It was a public space, bustling, yet quiet enough to allow for discreet conversation. It also represented, in a way, a refuge, a place of knowledge and silence, where hidden truths could come to light without attracting attention. That day, Carmen sat on the library steps, pretending to read a book while her heart pounded. She had followed the plan she had devised with Detective Miguel Hernandez and investigator David Chen, who were watching from a distance to ensure her safety. The idea was simple and risky. Allow Maria Elena to approach of her own free will, without feeling threatened. Time seemed to drag. Carmen watched the movement on the street, the people coming and going, the California sun reflecting off the glass buildings. When she felt a presence approaching, a soft, restrained voice whispered beside her, "Carmen, I am you. Don't look yet. People are watching you." The world seemed to stop in that instant. The sound of traffic, the murmur of people, everything vanished. Carmen immediately recognized the timbre of the voice, the accent, the way of speaking that no amount of time could erase. She stood still, fighting the urge to turn and hug her sister. Tears began to flow silently. Maria Elena continued speaking, with a tone of urgency and contained emotion. "You don't know how many times I've wanted to contact you. For years, I've lived in the shadows, hiding from dangerous people, but I needed to see you. I needed to warn you." Carmen, still without turning around, replied with a trembling voice, "Sister, I've been looking for you for 1 year. Tell me you're fine." Then Maria Elena, taking a deep breath, began to tell what had really happened since the day she disappeared in 2007. Her words revealed a story Carmen could never have imagined. At first, she said, she had agreed to make small document deliveries for a man named Ricardo, who worked as an intermediary for a company connected to the airport. What seemed like a simple job soon turned into a trap. I thought it was something temporary, that he just wanted to help me with my debts, but when I tried to leave, it was already too late. Maria Elena explained that she soon realized she was involved with an international criminal organization that used the airport as a base of operations. This network trafficked drugs, people, and, most importantly, manipulated financial data and confidential information. Maria Elena had been recruited for her administrative skills and the ease with which she handled documents and records. "They forced me to work with financial information and lists of protected witnesses," she confessed. "Those people had access to things that should never have been in the hands of criminals. If I refused, they threatened to harm our family." On the day of her disappearance, Maria Elena recounted, she discovered that the delivery she was making didn't involve papers or money, but rather confidential data from authorities and witnesses under government protection. Realizing the gravity of the situation, he decided to flee. He pretended to go to the bathroom and, with the help of an airport employee connected to the internet, escaped through a service door. She thought she would be taken to a safe place, but she was taken to a safe house on the outskirts of Mexico City. "It wasn't a conventional kidnapping," she explained. "They had me under control, but they needed me alive. They used me to process information, to keep their business running. For 3 years, Maria Elena lived in veiled captivity. She had limited freedom, but was constantly monitored. Her job was to review fake bank documents, clean up traces of illegal transactions, and rewrite data on fake identities used by the network. I learned to survive without trusting anyone, she said bitterly. I saw how people who tried to escape disappeared. I knew that if I tried to contact you, I would put them in danger. In 2010, an internal dispute between the organization's leaders opened a rift. There was a war within the group, he said. I used the chaos to escape. With the help of one of the men who also wanted to leave crime, he managed to flee to the north of the country and cross the border clandestinely. Since then, his life had become a succession of escapes and new beginnings. I lived in Tijuana, Phoenix, San Antonio, until I finally arrived in Los Angeles. Each city, a new identity, always afraid that they would find me. Carmen finally turned her face and looked at her. Time had left its visible marks. Maria Elena was thinner, with short, dyed hair, but her eyes, the same as always, revealed a mixture of guilt, relief, and pain. The two were silent for a few seconds, simply observing each other. Then Carmen hugged her. "You're alive," he murmured. "That's all that matters." Maria Elena wept silently, her body tense, as if she still feared being observed. When they calmed down, Carmen asked why they were contacting her after so long. Maria Elena explained that after the death of Ruben Montes, one of the leaders of the former network, other groups began hunting down people who had worked for him, trying to recover valuable information. They started looking for the families of the disappeared, and she said, "When you hired Miguel again, you caught his attention. Dangerous people started following you. I knew I should have warned you before it was too late." The 2018 message, sent from the old number, had been a last resort. Maria Elena said that a former member of the network, now an ally, helped reactivate the line for just a few hours, using technology to mask the origin of the transmission. "It was the only way to contact you without exposing myself," she explained. "I couldn't risk a call or a public meeting. That's why I sent the message and asked you to go alone." Carmen listened in silence, absorbing every word. She now understood the fear her sister carried. Maria Elena lived in the shadows, between survival and guilt, paying the price for decisions made under pressure and desperation. "I spent years crying," Maria Elena said, her eyes welling up. "But I don't want to hide anymore. I just wanted you to know I was alive and that everything I did was to protect them." Carmen took her hands. "So let's end this together. You're no longer alone." The words seemed simple, but they carried the weight of a decade of pain and distance. For the first time in 11 years, the two sisters were face to face, united once again by the truth, a painful but liberating truth. In that reunion in front of the library, Maria Elena confessed not only to the crimes of which she had been a victim and accomplice, but also revealed the extent of an underground world that operated in the shadows of law and morality. The disappearance that had begun as a routine trip had become a fight for survival. Carmen, upon hearing everything, understood that her sister's rescue would not only be physical, but also emotional. And in that moment, he made a silent promise. He would do whatever it took to bring her back to the light, even if it meant defying the ghosts of the past and the enemies of the present. The final plan began to unfold the night Carmen Vasquez and her sister, Maria Elena, reunited in Los Angeles. After 11 years of silence and lies on flight, the two finally stood face to face, fully aware of the depth of the abyss that separated them and the criminal network that had imprisoned Maria Elena for over a decade. For hours, they talked in a secure hotel room, under the discreet watch of investigators Miguel Hernandez and David Chen. Carmen, overcome by a mixture of love, indignation, and determination, understood that the only way to free her sister for good was not to hide her, but to expose everything. The idea came almost instinctively, but charged with logic and courage. Carmen knew that as long as the information Maria Elena was keeping remained secret, she would remain a target. Criminals would hunt her, considering her a living threat. And what if all this information were public? Carmen asked, looking at her sister. What if these people lost the power they have over you because what they're trying to hide would already be in the hands of the authorities and the press? Maria Elena hesitated. What Carmen proposed was a complete break, a direct attack on an international criminal structure with branches on both sides of the border. But as she reflected, she realized it made sense. "If everything goes to the light, they won't have time to use me," he replied, his tone resigned but hopeful. Over the next few hours, Miguel and David helped outline an ambitious plan. The amount of information Maria Elena possessed was colossal. Names of leaders and intermediaries, bank accounts, trafficking routes, records of fraudulent transactions, false identities, and even connections to corrupt public officials. For years, she had been forced to manipulate financial data, falsify documents, and erase digital traces. Now, this same knowledge would become the weapon that would bring down the organization. The first step was to contact the appropriate authorities. Miguel reached out to old contacts in the Mexican federal police and international agencies. The response was immediate. The magnitude of the information required a joint operation between Mexico and the United States. In the following weeks, representatives from the FBI and DEA met secretly with the group. The evidence provided by Maria Elena was so precise and detailed that, within days, a binational investigative committee was created. The case, until then considered an unsolved disappearance, became one of the largest criminal dossiers in recent decades. The strategy consisted of coordinated disclosure. Part of the information would be given to the press and human rights organizations, ensuring transparency and international visibility. Another part would be used to prepare arrest warrants and legal authorizations for simultaneous operations in Mexico and the United States. Maria Elena, aware of the risks, agreed to cooperate fully in exchange for official protection for herself and her family. "If I'm going to tell you everything, I want to do so knowing that you'll be safe," she told Carmen. For 3 months, federal agents, prosecutors, and financial experts worked side by side with Maria Elena. She provided spreadsheets, passwords, document storage locations, and even hidden digital memories she had stored during her escape. Each piece of information revealed was a surefire blow to the criminal network that had held her captive. By cross-referencing the data, authorities discovered connections between shell companies, currency exchange bureaus, fake jewelry stores, and even contracts with government agencies. The scheme was vast, involving hundreds of people and moving millions of dollars annually. In March 2019, after months of meticulous preparation, the final operation was launched simultaneously in 17 cities. More than 800 federal agents participated in the operation, including special units from the FBI, DEA, and Mexican federal police. The impact was immediate and devastating. In just 48 hours, more than 200 arrests were made, including operational leaders, intermediaries, and accomplices in the financial and airport security sectors. Assets, documents, digital records, and a fortune in gold, jewelry, and cryptocurrencies were seized. The international press hailed the case as the largest joint operation to combat transnational crime between Mexico and the United States in the last decade. The name of Maria Elena Vasquez was not disclosed in the news, but authorities acknowledged the decisive collaboration of a key witness under protection. Carmen followed every phase of the operation from a safe location, her heart torn between fear and pride. She knew her sister had risked everything, including her own life, to bring the truth to light. After the successful operation, Maria Elena was officially placed in the Witness Protection Program in both countries. She was given a new identity and transferred to a confidential location. However, before leaving for anonymity, she was given special permission to be reunited with her family. The reunion took place in a small country house, away from cameras and public attention. Carmen, upon seeing her sister walk through the door, felt the weight of 11 years of absence dissolve. They embraced for long minutes, without words, only tears. Maria Elena, exhausted but free, could finally breathe without fear. Their lives would never be the same again. Although they had to live in secrecy and under constant surveillance, there was peace. Maria Elena, now protected by a new name and a fresh start, maintained limited but regular contact with her family. Carmen, for her part, became an active advocate for causes related to missing persons and victims of criminal networks. The Vasquez sisters' story became a symbol of resilience and courage. Their 2007 disappearance, which began as just another unsolved case, ended as a victory against organized crime. Carmen's ultimate plan, to expose the truth rather than hide it, had freed not only her sister but also dozens of other victims whose lives were saved by dismantling the networks involved. For Maria Elena, freedom came at a high but fair price. She knew she could never live as she had before, but she also knew that by facing the shadows, she had restored meaning to her own existence. And for Carmen, The certainty of having fulfilled her promise to never give up was what kept her going. The love between the two sisters, forged amid loss and darkness, proved stronger than fear, more enduring than silence, and capable of illuminating even the darkest corners of truth. Today, Maria Elena Vasquez lives under a new identity, far from the cities that marked her pain and the faces that might recognize her. Her life is now quiet and discreet, but for the first time in many years, she can breathe in peace. After more than a decade on the run, the past is finally behind her. The Witness Protection Program welcomed her, offering safety and the chance to rebuild her story. Although she cannot reveal who she is or where she is, Maria Elena has found a way to live with dignity, far from the fear and guilt that haunted her for so long. The Vasquez case transcended borders and became a symbol of hope and justice. The disappearance, which in 2007 seemed like just another unsolvable mystery, became an example of human perseverance and international cooperation. The 2019 operation not only dismantled one of the most complex criminal networks in Mexico and the United States, but also showed that even the darkest stories can find a brighter outcome. Carmen's courage in reopening the case, confronting the authorities, and challenging institutional silence was fundamental. Without her, Maria Elena's fate would have remained in the shadows. For the Vasquez family, time has not erased the scars, but it has given new meaning to the word hope. The two sisters, separated by 11 years of pain, were reunited not only physically but spiritually. Maria Elena, who for so long believed she had lost everything, discovered that her family's love had withstood time, distance, and uncertainty. Carmen, in turn, learned that the search for truth is an act of love, a love that does not give up, is not intimidated, and does not forget. Today, Maria Elena's name represents all the missing people still waiting to be found and all the families who refuse to give up. Her story is a reminder that the truth may take time, but it always finds a way. That family love and perseverance are forces capable of breaking even the silence of 11 years. And that, as long as there is someone willing to fight, no missing person is truly lost. If you believe stories like this need to be told, subscribe to the channel, like it, and activate the notification bell to receive all our notifications. Here we continue to bring you real stories that show that, even in the darkest situations, hope can be reborn.